Do you have a sword? Yes. That is one of the verses in the Bible, especially from the mouth of Jesus, that has always perplexed me. So, before we turn to that passage, let's just set the context a little bit here. So, you remember, Jesus is up in the upper room. Jesus is up in the upper room. He's having Passover with the disciples. So, they've had the bread, they've had the wine, and he's about to go out. And he asks this perplexing question in Luke chapter 22, verse 36. He asked them, he said to them, "But now, do you have a purse? Take it, and also a bag. And if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one." What the? This comes from the mouth of someone who's recorded as probably the most loving individual in the world. Maybe that's always presented as Jesus, that he's a loving individual, that he turned the other cheek. And now he's asking his disciples, do you have any swords? And if you don't, we need to rectify that. Go sell your cloak and go buy one. It just doesn't make sense in my mind. So, needless to say, as my example showed, they answered that they had two swords. So among the 12 of them, if there's just 12 up in the room, they have two, which is perplexing because you must remember, at that time in Galilee, and now they're down in Jerusalem, there was no police. There was not pick up the phone and call 911 and someone will come there to help you. No, your protection was on you. If you traveled in groups, which was always wise out in the desert or in the wilderness, bring your own protection. A sword being the best means to protect yourself. But among the 13 of those men, they only were able to put together two, which raised an interesting question in my mind. Which of the 12 were carrying a sword? So the first obvious answer is Peter, because we're told that Peter in the Garden of Gethsemane hacks off a priest's ear, a high priest servant's ear. John tells us it's Matthias, so he hacks off his right ear. So we know that Peter was armed. So who of the other 11 was carrying a sword? So I thought a little bit more about that, and yep, I'm thinking the exact same thing you're thinking. It had to be the man with the money bags, because just like Brink Security, all their security guards carry a gun because they need protection, because they got carrying the money. So back in those days, who'd be carrying the sword? It's got to be Judas Iscariot. But that would mean then that once they get out into the Garden of Gethsemane, because Judas Iscariot has gone over to the high priest to bring in people to arrest Jesus, that there's only be one sword, which maybe explains why it's only Peter who strikes out. Or there's another option in there. Another Simon the Zealot. So back in the first century, they're never mentioned in the Bible except for the small list of 12 apostles as Simon the Zealot. But the Zealots are mentioned by Josephus as dagger men. So they were part of a revolutionary force who decided that they were going to overthrow the Roman powers with what? With their daggers that they concealed with them, and then they would sneak up in a busy crowd and stab the betrayers to the Jewish cause. Which is quite possible, but you gotta also wonder, another way of interpreting that is, instead of daggerman or zealot, is that he was a Canaanite. So just the town that he came from. It's a little dicey. Because you got to remember, Josephus comes after Jesus, and it seems like the proximity of the daggermen or the zealots rose up much closer to 70 CE, the destruction of Jerusalem, and the rebellion that happened before that, not at the time of Jesus, which is roughly about 30 CE. So something to think about. But maybe he just merely had kept his sword in its sheath, where Peter had brought it out in the time of defense that it was required. So but that got me thinking there. Why? Why would this pacifist man, Jesus, tell his apostles, his followers, to arm themselves. I came up with 5 reasons, but I don't know if this is an exhaustive list or this is the best reasons. One is in verse 37 of Luke chapter 22, he says, "It is written, and he was numbered with the transgressors," which is kind of loosely quoted from Isaiah 53:12. "And I tell you that this must be fulfilled. Yes, what is written about is reaching its fulfillment." Was Jesus just trying to look the part? Yes. If he was going to be accused of being a thief and a robber, of leading a rebellion, his followers would be armed. Maybe. It's an interesting thing, just a little rabbit hole I got while I was researching this, is Mark 15:28, which is not in your NIV Bible. We might have to look into that another time, but also mentions that Jesus was numbered among the transgressors, but in a much different setting. But we'll just kind of push that out of our minds for now, because we'll get back to the swords before Jesus goes down to Gethsemane. And Jesus, even in Gethsemane, when the guards come to arrest him, he responds to them in verse 52, "Am I leading a rebellion that you have come with swords and clubs?" So he's seeing them coming with swords and clubs, that he's too is responding with swords and clubs, which maybe he was trying to look the part. Another option I was thinking about is, well, if you knew they were coming for you, you'd want protection, right? There's a reason why the Second Amendment exists. Protection if they're coming for you. Was Jesus merely preparing his disciples, his followers, to defend him when they're trying to arrest him? I know that doesn't quite fit in with the whole picture of Jesus sacrificing himself on the cross. But he is a man. Was he just merely trying to prepare to defend himself? Possibly, but probably not. For one, in Matthew chapter 26, verse 52 reads, "Then Jesus said to him, 'Put your sword back into its place.'" So this is after Peter has chopped off Matthias' right ear. "For all those who take up the sword will perish by the sword." So it doesn't look like Jesus is advocating for violence here, at least not in Matthew's words. "Or do you think I cannot appeal to my Father, and who at once will put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? How then would the scriptures be fulfilled, which says that this has happened this way?" So Matthew clearly says that Jesus, no. He knew he had an out. If he needed defense, he'd call his father, and his father would be able to defend him. He had 12 legions of angels just like that who'd come. And that would be way better than 2 piddly little swords fighting all those men trying to arrest him. What about the apostles? What about the 12 disciples that were with, 11 disciples that were with Jesus? Yes, Jesus needed to be arrested, but these men that he had built into the last few years, if his message was going to continue, if his mission was going to not be stopped, they would have to be able to defend themselves to stay alive, to keep the mission alive. And in John chapter 18, it actually alludes that Jesus is concerned about their survival, because it reads, John chapter 18 verse 8, "Jesus answered, 'I told you that I am he. If you're looking for me, then let these men go.' This happened so the words he has spoken would be filled. I have not lost one of these that you've gave me." So clearly, Jesus was concerned about his followers and keeping the mission alive by keeping them alive. But it seems like more in the Garden of Gethsemane, the idea that he had was rather he would quickly and willingly be arrested to prevent them from seizing his entire all his companions and arresting the whole group. So the movement would still survive. So as soon as he told Peter to put away the sword, they flee into the darkness, and they lived to speak another day. Another thought, and this is really much more of a wild one, but you ever heard that you're not really tested unless you have the ability to do that which you're being tested against? Like, if you can't really cheat on your taxes, are you really truly being tempted to cheat on your taxes? No. So is Jesus just merely making sure, he was seeing if they would pass the test to turn the other cheek as he had taught them to do, as he was going to display to them. But the only way that they, like him, could say, "I am willingly submitted," is if they had the ability to pull out the sword and attempt to defend themselves instead of waiting on their Heavenly Father to act. And that is why when Peter was failing the test, he quickly said, put back that sword. Because if you use the sword, you're going to die by the sword. My fifth idea, and I think this one might actually encapsulate more what Jesus was trying to teach here. Teach or maybe prepare. And that this time it was going to be different. So I hadn't read the verse, but before he asked him about the bag and the purse and the swords, he had set the context to it. And this is what verse 35 says. Then Jesus asked them, when I sent you out without purse, bag, or sandals, did you lack anything? And they responded, nothing. So in that time, as Jesus was traveling out of Galilee, he had sent the 12 initially and then the 72 later on to go prepare for him coming to the villages. And he had told them very clearly, don't take anything to provide for your basic needs, because people in the town will welcome you. And as they welcome you, they'll provide for you. And obviously it worked. They had lacked nothing because the celebrity Jesus was coming. And people had heard about Jesus already, and they would be more than willing to welcome his followers to provide for them. But Jesus understood that times were changing. The dark clouds were rolling in. That no longer would Jesus be considered a savior or a wonder worker or even a prophet to be esteemed. No, now on, he would be considered a criminal and thief. And nobody wants to be helping the criminals and the thieves, do they? So the apostles, after his arrest, would not be able to just go out into the community and ask, hey, can I have a loaf of bread, or can I come into your house? Because from that time forward, they would be considered criminals along with their leader, Jesus, who was charged with treason and executed for that. So he was trying to tell them, yes, there is a time in which you'll be received and welcomed, and through that God will provide for all your needs. But a time is also coming when you will not be welcomed, you will not be provided for, and you must take care of your own needs during that time. And if I was going to have 3 takeaways from this is 3 of the takeaways. 1, careful of red herrings when you read stories in the Bible. I don't think the swords were the main point. And it is even possible that Peter and the other disciples got this point wrong too. They thought their personal protection was the most important thing, where Jesus was just trying to tell them, be prepared. Second of all, like Jesus, you need to read the situation and accommodate for it, adjust for it. So up in Galilee, when he's being received as a celebrity, he can just live off the other people. They'll welcome him as such. But when he moves into a situation where he'll no longer be welcomed, he must adapt and adjust to that. And this one's a little bit harder to take. Maybe I'm reading a little bit more into it. But people will misunderstand you. They misunderstood Jesus. They thought they were prepared to defend him. When he was saying prepare for your own lives here, be prepared to correct them. Just like Jesus, in the middle of the situation where he's being where he's having the test of his life, he has to look over to Peter and say, no, Peter, this is what my Father had wanted me to do. Put your sword away, and remind him of the principles of why. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It helps me to keep putting it through the algorithms and spread it to more of the people to better understand the life of Jesus and just to enjoy the history of this great man. Do you have any swords? How many swords do you have? Do you have any swords? What about you? Do you have a sword?